had one of his plays produced on Broadway, play God's Favorite. It was based loosely, very loosely, on the book of Job. Job Benjamin was a faithful servant of God and was blessed with a successful life with his wife Rose and his 3 children. Like the book of Job, God and the devil arrange a bet that Job will turn tail and run when his plush Long Island lifestyle crumbles around his ankles. Over the course of the play, comedy mixes in with the reality of the tragedy. As he meets the devil's advocate, he's standing there and all of a sudden, looking out the window, they see a fire down by the waterfront. Where's your factory, by the way? Down by the waterfront. Look at it burn. It's like a cardboard box. What do you make? Cardboard boxes. And so, through the comedy, you see how everything literally crumbles around Joe Benjamin. He loses his factory, his home, his family. He is cursed with illnesses that have never before been heard of. Through all of the comedy and the slapstick, theological aspect of how one can be faithful to God, even when life is all messed up, still happens to come through. Of course, couldn't help thinking about the play this week through our reading, but also through a report on the news. One of the news reports this week shared a new poll asking people of any faith, how well is God doing his job? Sitting around the table chuckling. But I was a little surprised with the results. Only 9% said God's not doing a good job. I was impressed. 51% thought that he was doing a good job. The other 40% didn't really know. Only 99% threw God under the bus. Not too bad. And when you're looking at popularity polls, 51% is actually pretty good. But the other thing I noticed with the play and all this going on was the parallels between Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Job's, or Job Benjamin's, ordeal. Both of these powerful men were blessed with great wealth, family, property, animals, and livestock, prestige, and any other type of blessing you could ask for. But yet we see both of them lose virtually everything for one sole purpose. And that was to glorify God. As I mentioned in the introduction, this is the second of the dream interpretations we encounter in Daniel. Like the first one, Daniel is the last of Nebuchadnezzar's court to step forward and translate the dream. Unlike the first one, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't play games with this one. Rather than waiting for his court to tell him what the dream was, the king comes out and shares it. He knows that his sages and advisors will give their interpretation, most likely making him out to look good. But he also accepts the reality that the truth is going to come from this guy Daniel. In fact, as Daniel prepares to reveal the meaning, it is clear that this interpretation is not going to have a positive spin. He apparently wears a horrified look on his face. And the literal translation is that he was appalled at what he had to tell the king. We've heard of the king's temper, his interesting means of execution, and I'm sure that was playing into Daniel's mind. But the king eases his mind and tells him not to be frightened. Just simply tell me the truth. Nebuchadnezzar had obviously learned the lesson that although truth may not be good news, there's at least peace in it. He is filled with how wonderful his kingdom has become. Several times in the telling of the tale, it's mentioned as to how this tree, our version says, reaches to the sky, reaches to the heavens. It's visible through all of the earth. There's a big but to all of this, though. Whereas King Nebuchadnezzar has been granted blessings from God through the advice of all these exiled Jewish men that he has been listening to, there's also through the wisdom and growth that has been experienced through this time of economic and progressive growth in Babylon. We see that God has taken care of the king. The king has not and will not acknowledge that he has been a benefactor of God's grace and love, and that's going to be the downfall of this great tree. We're familiar with stories of greatness that have fallen like trees deep in the woods. We remember several years ago when Enron officials sold off their stocks right before the company went into financial dismay. We regularly see celebrities who have everything they could possibly dream of fall into depression, drug and alcohol abuse, failed marriages, bankruptcy. Our lives are filled with stories, and sometimes they're even personal enough for us to pay even a little more attention than what E-News is sharing us. It's not uncommon for us to hear case after case of those who do not heed the wisdom that we all have, that all we have is given to us through the blessings of God. But even more commonly are the stories of those who do not know what God has to offer them. Nebuchadnezzar was slowly starting to hear that maybe there was more than his gods, Bel and Marduk. The living God of Daniel was obviously capable of providing more blessings and having more power than any of the pagan gods. And maybe the living God needed to be listened to with a little more weight. The fact that Daniel was told not to worry gives us the evidence that Nebuchadnezzar's stone heart was starting to be transplanted into one of compassion, eventually of love and faith that only the living God is able to give. As a part of this study of Daniel, I've asked if we dare to be a Daniel. Do we dare to be a Daniel in our homes, our neighborhoods,